I realized I was optional the night I stopped speaking mid-sentence and no one noticed. The words were still sitting on my tongue. Something small, something ordinary. But when I paused, when I waited for the natural opening where someone looks at you and says, "What were you about to say?" nothing came. Daniel kept scrolling. The room kept breathing. The moment passed without resistance. That was it. That was the sound of my place disappearing. Not a breakup, not a betrayal, not a fight. Just the quiet confirmation that my presence no longer carried weight. I sat there on the edge of the sofa in our Brighton flat, the same place where we used to sit tangled together when everything still felt mutual. The lamp cast a warm circle of light on the wall. Outside, the sea air rattled faintly through a cracked window. Everything looked the same. And yet I felt like I had crossed a line I could not step back over. People are not supposed to hear this part yet. The part where you admit that nothing dramatic happened. That there was no villain, no explosion. Just the slow realization that if you vanished, life would continue uninterrupted. That truth does not fit neatly into stories about love. It makes people uncomfortable. Because it asks a question no one wants to ask themselves. Am I necessary here? I did not cry that night. That came later. At first, there was a strange calm, a kind of clarity that settles in when denial finally gives up. I watched Daniel from the corner of my eye, the way his brow furrowed slightly as he read. The way he smiled at something on his screen. A smile that did not include me. And suddenly I saw our relationship the way it actually was, not the way I had been explaining it to myself. My name is Claire. And this is the moment I stopped pretending I did not feel myself fading. For a long time, I believed love was proven by how adaptable you could be. I learned that growing up in Leeds, in a house where harmony mattered more than honesty. My mother taught me, without meaning to, that keeping things smooth was a form of care. That wanting too much made you difficult. That endurance was something to be proud of. So, when Daniel and I started drifting, I told myself this was normal. Long-term relationships settle. Passion quiets. Independence grows. I repeated these ideas like prayers. But there is a difference between settling and erasing. I see it clearly now. But back then, it crept in slowly. It showed up in small, reasonable moments. Plans made without asking. Stories told without looking at me. Decisions discussed after they were already decided. At first, I laughed it off. Then I adjusted. Then I stopped noticing how often I was the one doing the adjusting. I made myself easier to love, or what I thought love required. I kept my disappointments to myself. I softened my tone when I wanted to be direct. I waited instead of asking. I smiled when something inside me tightened, and slowly, invisibly, I taught him that I would still be there no matter how little I took up. That is the part people do not like to hear either. That sometimes being optional is not something done to you. It is something you participate in because the alternative feels too risky. Because asking to be chosen feels like begging. Because leaving feels like failure. Because you remember who they were in the beginning and you keep hoping that version will come back if you are patient enough. I remember one Sunday morning especially clearly. We were in the kitchen. Sunlight came in through the window, catching dust in the air. Daniel was making coffee. He mentioned he had booked a weekend away with friends. He said it casually, like an afterthought. I nodded, smiled, said that sounds nice. What I did not say was why did it not occur to you to ask me? What I did not say was, when did your life stop including me by default? What I did not say was I feel like a guest in my own relationship. Those words stayed trapped inside me, pressing against my ribs, heavy and unspoken. And the more I swallowed them, the more natural it felt for him to live as if I were not essential to his choices. That is how optional happens. Not through cruelty, through comfort. When I stopped initiating conversations, days passed. When I stopped checking in, silence settled without tension. When I stopped filling the space remained empty and no one rushed to fill it. That is when it became impossible to ignore, because if you matter deeply to someone, your absence creates disturbance. It shifts the air. It invites concern. It leaves a shape behind. I was leaving no shape at all. The grief of that realization surprised me. It was not loud. It was hollow. Like discovering a room you thought was solid has been slowly emptying out behind the walls. I mourned the version of myself who believed love meant being endlessly understanding. I mourned the future I imagined, where we would naturally choose each other without having to ask. And I mourned something else too, the time I spent convincing myself that this was enough. I asked myself questions late at night when Daniel was already asleep, his breathing steady, untroubled. If I walked away, would he fight for me, or would he simply reorganize his life? If I asked for more presence, would he try, or would he tell me I was overthinking? If I stayed exactly as I was, how long before I disappeared entirely? These were not dramatic questions. They were practical, honest, necessary, and the answers, even the imagined ones, told me more than reassurance ever had. I realized I had been measuring love by how little it asked of him instead of how safe it allowed me to be. Being optional teaches you strange habits. You become hyper-aware of tone. You read into pauses. You celebrate minimal effort because it feels rare. You tell yourself that independence is attractive even when it feels lonely. You learn how to stay without being seen. And eventually, you forget what it feels like to take up space without apology. There is a moment I return to often now. I was walking alone along the Brighton seafront. The wind was sharp, the sky low and gray. People passed in pairs, laughing, talking, arguing even. All of it felt alive. I remember thinking how strange it was that I felt more present walking alone than I did sitting beside the person I loved. That thought landed heavy, because loneliness inside a relationship is a particular kind of ache. It confuses you. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you wonder if you are ungrateful for wanting more than stability and silence. But love is not meant to feel like shrinking. I did not confront Daniel immediately. Not because I was afraid of him, but because I needed to hear myself clearly first. I needed to know whether I was asking for something unreasonable or simply asking the wrong person. So I stopped editing myself. I named my discomfort instead of smoothing it over. I allowed silence to exist without rushing to fix it. I paid attention to how it felt to prioritize my inner voice for the first time in years. And something surprising happened. I started to feel stronger, even before anything changed between us. Because when you stop abandoning yourself, you regain a kind of quiet power, not the kind that demands or controls, the kind that knows. I knew then that I could no longer live in a place where my presence was negotiable. Whether Daniel could meet me there or not became secondary. That is another thing people are not supposed to hear yet. Sometimes the turning point is not choosing to leave or stay. It is choosing to see clearly, even if clarity leads somewhere unfamiliar. Some people rise when you stop making yourself small. They realize what they stand to lose. They adjust. They show up. Others do not. Not because they are evil, but because they were comfortable with you being optional. And comfort can be more powerful than love. If you are listening to this and something in you feels exposed, if you recognize the quiet moments, the swallowed words, the way you have learned to disappear gently, I want you to pause with me here. You are not broken for wanting to matter. You are not needy for wanting presence. You are not dramatic for noticing absence. You are responding to information. Being optional is not a verdict on your worth. It is feedback about the space you are in. And you are allowed to choose spaces that choose you back. I wish someone had told me earlier that love does not require you to earn your place through silence. That being easy is not the same as being valued. That peace without connection is not peace at all. I am still learning what it means to take up space without fear. Still learning how to trust that wanting more does not make me difficult. It makes me honest. But I know this now, with a certainty that did not exist before that quiet night on the sofa. I will never again make myself optional in my own life. If this story felt uncomfortably familiar, if it put words to something you have been feeling but avoiding, you are not alone. This channel exists for moments like this. For the truths that arrive quietly but change everything. If you want more stories that speak to the parts of love we rarely say out loud, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the Heart's Archive, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they are allowed to matter. Until next time, be gentle with your heart. It deserves to be chosen.